morning, everyone. I'm Chris Rebelo. I'm the Senior Director of Communications here at the Buck Institute. It is my extreme pleasure to welcome you to this fourth installment of our Live Better Longer seminar series. Today, we're going to talk about neurodegenerative diseases and how close or not close we are to getting really good treatments for them. So, before we go any further, there's a change of plans for today's seminar. Dr. Julie Anderton was supposed to be here. She got called away at the last minute, but do not despair. I have come up with a delightful alternative, so you're going to hear about that in just a minute. Before we get to the delightful stuff, a couple housekeeping issues. If you haven't already done it, please put your cell phones on silent or vibrate. And also, the fire department is always happy when I point out the emergency exits at the back of the room. So how many of you are new to the Buck Institute? Great, we love having new people here. So what we're going to do is instead of me bringing you up to date with what's happening here at the Buck, we're going to show a short video and let the folks who are actually doing the work tell you about the Buck. Jordan, go ahead and play it.
The Buck Institute is interested in understanding aging, not only to make us live longer, but to actually alleviate and suppress the development of diseases.
Chronic disease is the great health challenge of our time. Aging is the main driver of chronic disease. To eliminate chronic disease, we must harness the biology of aging so we can live healthy longer. The Buck Institute is the world's first research organization dedicated solely to the biology of aging. We work with the building blocks of biology to understand how we age.
The Buck is concentrating on really trying to go to the root of the problem, so understanding that we can sort of intervene really early.
The Buck Institute is probably the best place in the world to be working on aging because there's so many different aspects of aging that are being studied. It's key because no one lab can do it all.
Our scientific explorers are brilliant, curious, and committed.
The idea that you could actually develop drugs that slow down the aging process was really something that 20 or 30 years ago people thought this cannot be done. Not only can it be done, but we will do it.
The pieces are in place. And we are in a unique position to put them together. Our world is defined by paradigm shifts, created by scientific discoveries. The biology of aging is the next frontier.
We're working toward a world where healthcare is better. It's a world where if we can eradicate the aging component to disease, we're all going to live healthier and longer.
It's just an incredible vision that really will, surpass anything else that we've ever seen before.
We are inviting you to a future of aging without illness. It's happening today, and it's happening here. Join us.
There you go. All right. Before I introduce today's speakers, I want to thank our sponsors. They're listed in the programs you have. I also want to make sure that all of you have note cards in case you want to ask a question. If you need a note card, raise your hand. Volunteers will come and bring you one. They'll also pick up your questions. Also, special shout out to those of you on Zoom. We have a full house, so we have folks who are on Zoom. You too can ask questions. Just enter them in the Q&A section of the Zoom page, and somebody will get those questions up to me. So, on to the delightful part of this event. We've put together a panel of 4 outstanding Buck scientists who work on aging and neurodegenerative diseases. You should have received a handout in your seminar packet that describes their backgrounds. Here's why I love talking to these people. They are the ones in the lab doing the work. They're the ones that look through those microscopes every day and make the discoveries. Their enthusiasm is infectious, and I mean infectious in the best possible way. Got to be careful about that these days. They each come at their work from a different angle, so I'm hoping that you're going to get a really good breadth of information today. So, you're also going to get a good sense of how science works here at the Buck. So without further ado, I'm going to welcome my panelists up to the stage. And why these folks are taking their places, I want to let you know they are all four of them are PhDs. They are not MDs, which means that they're not qualified to give specific medical advice. So please keep your questions of general interest. Always, we urge you to talk to your personal physician before taking any action based on anything that you hear today. So, before we get started, a question for all of you. Who here either is dealing with a neurodegenerative disease or knows somebody or has known somebody who has a neurodegenerative disease? Okay, guys, you got an engaged audience. All right, cool. So, let me introduce our panelists. So first up is Edward Anderton. We call him Eddie. He hails from the UK. Eddie, I understand your work is focused on the connection between aging and neurodegenerative diseases. Tell us about it.
Yeah, that's right. First of all, thanks for having me here. Really amazing to see so many people in the audience. So really, my work is trying to understand why it's the case that some people age healthy and don't develop neurodegeneration, while others succumb to diseases like Alzheimer's, for example. And one key unifying feature of all of these different age-related neurodegenerative diseases, like the ones I've given examples here, is the accumulation of these things called protein aggregates. We've probably all heard of proteins before. We eat proteins, chicken, for example. Our bodies are really made up of proteins, and the proteins do the work, but they need to be a specific shape in order to work. And so one thing that happens, we don't exactly know why, but one thing that happens in these diseases is that they lose their shape and they begin to stick together into these clumps. We think that's the main driver of disease, but we don't know what differentiates healthy aging from that state. So that's something that my work's trying to figure out.
So he's being modest. Eddie just published a really cool paper. Everybody's familiar, right, with those amyloid plaques that gather in your brain? Well, he found out that there's more stuff going on with those amyloid plaques, right? There's more proteins. Some of those proteins might be related to aging. You want to, yeah.
Yeah, that's right. So we actually found, in this case, we used a model organism that we use in the lab, which is a tiny, tiny microscopic worm. We use it because it's really easy to work with, and it actually only lives about 3 weeks, so you can study the entire aging process in that time. And we found that in those animals, whilst they're aging, they actually accumulate these protein aggregates in a similar way to what we see in disease during the normal aging process. So it's possible that there's an overarching phenomenon here, and that actually amyloid might just be one example of a protein that's losing its shape.
Cool. So there could be a lot else going on in those proteins that we need to find out about. He's the guy doing it. Okay, next up we have Manish Chamoli. So Manish, you are working on a particular hallmark of aging that tends to go a bit south as we age.
Yeah, first, thank you, Chris, for having me, and hi, everyone. So yes, I study our body's ways of cleaning up the damage and a process known as autophagy. So as we age, our cells lose their ability to clear up the damage. And one of the reason it leads to is like you get a lot of age-related diseases, including neurodegeneration. And my research is particularly focused on understanding why our cells lose this ability to clear up the damage and how can we stop it. And some of the ways I do it by discovering the small molecules which can stop this process, clear up the damage, and understanding how these molecules function so that we can develop them into a safe and accessible therapeutic interventions for neurodegenerative diseases and aging itself.
So Manish was just involved in a recent paper that discovered a small molecule that actually boosts that autophagy process and makes our mitochondria healthier and happier, and mitochondria is what gives us all energy. So good for you. All right, next we have Minna Schmidt. Minna is all about Parkinson's disease, specifically Parkinson's and exercise. She has a personal investment in this. Go for it, Minna.
Thank you, Chris. I'm also very happy to be here and to share a little bit about my personal experience as well as my perspective on Parkinson's. So the images I have here in the middle are a pair of boxing gloves because there is a great program called Rock Steady Boxing, which helps people who have Parkinson's exercise. There are many different components of this program that are beneficial. One of them is the high intensity aspect. The other is just that people are getting moving, extending their arms and legs, and getting outside of that feeling of discomfort and rigidity that often comes with Parkinson's. And then I have two other images here that both highlight this chemical called lactic acid, which is produced during exercise and has often been thought of as a bad guy. It's the thing that usually people say leads to muscle soreness. But really, over the last 20 years or so, it's been rehabilitated, and it's actually a very important carbohydrate. It has a very beneficial effect on the brain, and we're interested in understanding it a bit better. And the reason why I have the image of the gastrointestinal system and the brain on the right-hand side is to reflect the importance of the gut and something called the gut-brain axis in the spread of Parkinson's and possibly in a potential therapy, and the fact that there are bacteria called lactobacillus that also produce lactic acid and that are increased when we exercise. So our gut is malleable to the effects of exercise, and this is something that we're interested in studying more.
We will be talking more about that gut-brain axis as we go through this. Finally, we come to Chaska Walton. Chaska has, I think, the coolest project going on here at the Buck. He got more than $2 million from the federal government to come up with, it's called a Transformational Research Award, so high risk, high reward. And he's working on developing a smart drug delivery system that is going to hopefully allow us to treat multiple Alzheimer's pathologies all at once. And you'll know how cool this is because I'm willing to give Chaska the clicker.
All right. Thank you all for coming. It's very humbling to have you all here. Yes, I'm leading the cell engineering team at the Anderton lab here at the Buck Institute. We're working on making sort of an artificial immune system that can target multiple aspects of Alzheimer's disease at the same time, which is something that modern medicine can't do very effectively right now. So here you have some images in which you can see a person is being injected with a drug intravenously, and this drug could be the recently FDA-approved Leqembi. And you can see the drug has its target in the brain, and then with these drugs, only a small fraction of them reach the brain. The rest of the drug is dispersed throughout the body, potentially having off-target effects. If you have a second drug, your risks of off-target effects increase. If you had a third one, even more. If you had a fourth one, even more. And that's probably why in clinical trials in Alzheimer's disease, you mostly, the vast majority of them are a single drug being tested. And we know Alzheimer's disease is a multifactorial disease that requires several drugs. So we asked whether we could engineer cells to make these different drugs, and whether we could add a lock to these cells so that this lock could only be opened in the brain so that the drugs are released exclusively in the brain and not outside of the body. to enable a new form of combination therapy that's unlimited. This one.
Pretty exciting, right? If this one works, we're on our way. All right, so let's start off with talking about where we are. So there are currently 2 FDA-approved drugs that are in use. One was just recently approved for Alzheimer's. So tell us about these 2 drugs. Chaska, what do they do? What's the issues with them?
So these drugs do what they're supposed to do. I think there's a question.
Oh, she wants.
Okay.
Can we have cards up here? One of our volunteers. Just keep your hand up. You'll get one, Judy. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. So these drugs are both antibodies, and how they work is they basically target amyloid beta aggregates, which is a feature of Alzheimer's disease, so that immune cells in your brain will go and grab them and eat them. And that's how they clear it. That's the role. So these antibodies, these drugs actually do that. They do clear amyloid beta, and they clear other biomarkers of Alzheimer's disease pathology. That's why they've received approval. What really the controversy around this drug is whether clearing that amyloid beta is going to cure Alzheimer's disease. So that's where there's not that, there's a mild slow down in cognitive decline. But the drugs do what they're supposed to do.
But there's problems with side effects, right?
Yes. So the problems with the side effects are that there's several, but the most common one is called ARIA, which is related to inflammation and microhemorrhages that happen in certain patients. That's why they have to be carefully monitored. And lecanemab or Leqembi was purportedly going to have more ARIA than donanemab, which has been recently approved. But it turns out it's the other way around. So for now, Leqembi seems like the best option.
But even so, Alzheimer's is such a multifactorial disease. These 2 drugs, even though you say they work, they're not enough, right? Probably?
Exactly. Alzheimer's, well, you have the amyloid beta pathology, and you're going to have your tau pathology. There's inflammation. There's multiple aspects of it. But the interesting thing is that a lot of scientists are fighting like whether we should treat amyloid beta or whether we should treat tau. It kind of reminds me of these videos where you have these dogs fighting on the opposite sides of the fence, and when they open the fence, they stop fighting. So the question is, why not treat both? We know they're more than likely both bad. Why not treat both instead of fighting again? Why treat this one or treat the other one?
Great, thank you. Okay, so just want to also give some information about where we stand. Good news, bad news. First, the bad news. So by 2030, 8.5 million of us Americans are projected to have Alzheimer's disease. Very interesting, 2030 is the year that the last of us baby boomers are going to turn 65, so I'm sure that has something to do with it. But here is the good news. Your personal risk for Alzheimer's is probably lower than you think. So, the percentage of older Americans with dementia fell 30% from 2000 to 2016. That was a RAND Corporation study. There was another study in 2019 that showed Alzheimer's rates had fallen by 13% over the last 25 years. So why is this? Well, we're not smoking anymore. Also, a large percentage of folks who do have Alzheimer's have issues with the blood vessels in their brain. Over the last 50 years, we have done a lot to prevent heart disease, right? Anti-cholesterol drugs, we're doing things for heart disease. What's good for the heart is good for the brain. And there's a thought that all the stuff that we're doing for our hearts actually is paying off for our brains. So I'm going to leave this up there. This is good news. This is good news. So Chaska talked about drugs for Alzheimer's. Minna, is there any disease-modifying drug right now for Parkinson's? What's going on with Parkinson's?
So there are 2 drugs right now. One of them is a GLP agonist. It was shown to be neuroprotective in a Parkinson's mouse model. There's a chemical called MPTP, which is highly neurotoxic to neurons or toxic to neurons, and this drug was shown to be protective. There is also another drug, really it's also an antibody. Chaska is much better at pronouncing the names than I'd have to look at my phone. Actually, let me do that just so you guys know. But the first drug I mentioned, which is a GLP agonist, is lixisenatide. And the antibody is prasinezumab. So I'm glad I looked at my phone for that. The second is an antibody against a protein called alpha-synuclein, which, like A-beta or tau, are hallmarks of Parkinson's. This is a protein, alpha-synuclein is a protein that also clumps together and is thought to correlate with a progression of Parkinson's. And very interestingly, from the gut to the brain, through the gut-brain axis is one of the ways through which it can lead to the progression of the disease.
So just so you know, we're going to send out an email after this. You don't have to worry about writing down these drug names. We'll give them to you. So just so you know, we're going to take care of that. So I want to get into lifestyle factors, and I think Parkinson's is the way to do that. So talk about exercise. Like, what impact? Let's talk in terms of Parkinson's, and then we'll get into Alzheimer's.
So with exercise and Parkinson's, it's the best medicine I believe that we currently have. One of the reasons why is because it's completely natural. There is a clinical trial going on right now that is in the later stages. I believe it's phase 3, that is looking at high intensity exercise for people who were just recently diagnosed. So that means that they're not taking any medication as of yet, and the amount of exercise that is generally recommended across the board is 5 times a week for 30 minutes a day. For this exercise regimen, it also means that you're going at a very intense rate, 80% of your maximal capacity. However, you can imagine that that's not so possible for many people. So that's why we're interested, and many people are interested in exercise mimetics, as well as also looking at what is happening in the gut. And there was a recent paper that took the perspective of a physical therapist and how exercise may change the gut microbiome, and then this may be a very important future direction for physical therapists to focus on. So I'm very excited about what that might bring.
Great. Let's talk about exercise overall for brain health. So I don't know if any of you saw the news, but Dean Ornish, who is locally famous everywhere, he recently did a small study that really focused on lifestyle issues for Alzheimer's disease. So Eddie, can you talk about that?
Yeah, sure. So this trial, like you said, it was around 50 people, so it's a pretty small trial. But it was looking at the efficacy of the Ornish method, which is really a combination of multiple factors. So one of those is exercise, like you mentioned, but they also had meditation, which is basically a stress reduction technique in this trial. But then they also had a vegan diet in there, some lifestyle coaching factors. So it's really hard to determine which of these is the causal factor, but they did see a significant reduction in cognitive decline in people with Alzheimer's disease. So that's a really big deal, because that's what it's the holy grail we're all going for. I would say, though, that in reading around this topic, it seems that you can get pretty profound effects from just exercise alone. So there have been trials with dementia. People have dementia, so not necessarily Alzheimer's disease dementia, but dementia. And they see a big reduction, like 30% reduction in cognitive decline. So it could be possible that these other factors are playing a limited role and exercise is playing the main role. And I would say that honestly, just working in aging, because I work on neurodegeneration, but I also work on brain aging, and I'm really interested in just like the aging process. That's why I came here to do my PhD originally. If we could package exercise into a drug, right? Wouldn't that just be like the $1 trillion drug? It's truly profound, the effect it has on all of the different hallmarks of aging. We study all these different ways that the body changes with aging, and it basically seems to counteract all of those different ways. So I can't recommend it enough. And I think, like Minna was saying, cardiovascular exercise, aerobic exercise seems to have the most profound impact. But we need to also think about keeping our muscles strong as we get older too. So I also advocate for strength training for people who can do it. Because really staying strong is going to prevent you from all kinds of issues.
I mean, so what of those drugs is Advil, right?
That is true. It's like aging sometimes hurts, but yeah, keep moving. So I want to keep people motivated to get more exercise, myself included. So can you give us an example? What happens in the noggin when we exercise? What happens? What's the good stuff?
Well, the associations, a lot of the things that we know about this come from studies with animals. So we can't say so much about the changes that happen in a living person's brain. But we know that it increases blood flow, it reduces inflammatory markers in the blood, and we know that that's really good for the brain. And what we know from animal studies is that so neurogenesis, which means the birth of new brain cells, new neurons, happens after exercise. So it seems to be promoting the production of new, what would be young brain cells.
Great. So I have read this. I read this years ago, which really blew my brain out. Like, whoa. So it's possible that people have all this pathology in their brain, but they don't have Alzheimer's, right? So how does that happen?
Well, I was actually looking closer into these studies. Some of them are using markers that are positive on emission tomography markers, and they're not that accurate, or they can't distinguish, for example, from cerebral amyloid angiopathy and Alzheimer's. So some of those, a larger percent of those, that cohort is positive for amyloid pathology, but is cognitively normal. However, they do tend to have a development or a higher risk of development of cognitive impairment. When these studies are done with post-mortem markers, which they can actually establish the Alzheimer's disease stage and confirm Alzheimer's disease, there's much less people that is resilient. But having said that, exercise, also you're using your brain. There's a large there's a correlation between your level of education and resilience, but also how much you use your brain, learning. Yeah.
So resilience is a very, very big deal as far as having cognitive resilience. I also want to call out, there's a lab here at the Buck. These folks aren't the only ones who are studying Alzheimer's neurodegeneration. Tara Tracy, who runs the lab here, her lab is really focused on brain resilience. And Tara will be up here with me in the coming months, so come check that out if you want to. Let's talk some about, go ahead.
A little bit on this resilience part. I mean, recently I came across this study which was done in a Netherlands biobank cohorts, and the cool thing about that repository is all of the brain samples which has been collected there, you basically have also a track record of what diseases they have been gone through and everything. So eventually it's like when the postmortem analysis was done on them, what it turns out, like a lot of people who have this amyloid plaques, and even though do not develop the pathologies or like the symptoms, some of the reasons underlying may be that they have inflammation not going in the same way is like. So because this is one of the very major cause of pathologies by amyloid plaque, that you have inflammatory responses against them, which are highly active, and that causes the damage. And it turns out that in these brain samples, they could see that microglia, which are specific immune cells in the brain, are involved in causing inflammation and releasing the cytokines, which helps the brain. They are not activated in the same way like the persons who develop pathology and so the symptoms. And the other thing which was very interesting is that they have more mitochondria, which is a very interesting thing, because brain in general requires a lot of energy. All of this synapse connection and neuronal filing, it's highly energy dependent process. So having a huge amount of mitochondria, or like at least a good amount of mitochondrial biogenesis, can be beneficial. And actually it turns out, yes, this is one of the very prominent factors for having a resilience in this sample. So again, and it comes down to how do you boost your mitochondria, and it turns out exercise is one of the best ways to do it.
Yeah, and actually tying down to this, so one of the effects of these drugs that you posted is actually inflammation. It's one of the side effects. So part of the clearance of these amyloid beta plaques is it stimulates a pro-inflammatory phenotype in mitochondria. So it could be like masking, some of the beneficial effects.
So inflammation, we want to control inflammation. Is there a way that diet factors into inflammation? Anybody want to talk about that?
Well, in clinical trials, anti-inflammatories haven't been very successful, though.
Okay.
Yeah, but again, they're affecting your whole body. There's not like targeted.
But having said that, yes, I mean, there are certain diets which are which have anti-inflammatory processes or effects, and phytochemicals are like plant-based diets and everything. They are rich with a lot of phytochemicals which have known potency or are known anti-inflammatory molecules. So it's recommended that having a plant-based diet or a diet which is rich in phytochemicals can help your brain health, and generally by curbing the inflammation which is going in the brain. So yes, I mean, I can totally see the profound effect, but yes, the exact studies and clinical trials, they still need to be conducted to have their direct relation in there.
Yeah, I just want to chime in on something, and it relates actually to something that Minna said earlier about the GLP-1 agonists. So people have probably heard of semaglutide or Mounjaro. These are different drugs that people are taking for weight loss. And these are actually anti-diabetic drugs and anti-obesogenic drugs. And they seem to work by promoting people to eat less and then they lose weight. But what people are seeing more and more now is that these have an anti-inflammatory effect. And so I think there was a trial actually with the one that you mentioned, I'm not going to try and pronounce, something Tide. In Parkinson's, and actually did have a positive effect in a small trial. So it's possible that these drugs that have an impact on diabetes and metabolism are having an impact on inflammation and therefore on neurodegeneration.
And this GLP-1 is a hormone. It's something produced in gut cells and can make its way into the bloodstream. So again, the importance of the gut, the health of the gut, the integrity of the tissue, and other factors that may contribute to it are important. And then probiotics can also lower inflammation as well. And there are different types of bacteria. Maybe you've heard of good bacteria, bad bacteria. The good bacteria are considered to be anti-inflammatory, and the bad, what did I just say? Good, okay. Anti-inflammatory. The bad bacteria are pro-inflammatory. So when we generally think about probiotics, either taking a supplement or eating certain foods like yogurts, kefir, sauerkraut, anything fermented that may help introduce probiotics, and in general, I think can make us feel better. Yes.
So I got this question that was written specifically for you. Any studies on the relationship of the vagus nerve and neurodegeneration? So this gets specifically into what you're studying.
Thank you for this question. The short answer is yes. The vagus nerve is the gut-brain axis. It innervates the colon, and Actually, Julie just sent me a paper the other day about IBD, inflammatory bowel disease, and how people who have this disease actually have that protein implicated in Parkinson's, alpha-synuclein, in their GI tissues, and that protein actually does make its way up into the brain. They also looked at people who had IBD. These were young people. These were people who were around 48 years old. And they had those alpha-synuclein clumps in that part of the region of the brain, the substantia nigra, that controls movement and that is affected mostly by Parkinson's. So exercise is actually something that can help strengthen the vagus nerve. Often we think of the vagus nerve as the part of our physiology that is responsible for the rest and digest state. And my understanding of exercise is that what it does is that it actually makes us actually feel the sympathetic, kind of the flight-fight effect that we experience when we're actually stressed or anxious or running away from something dangerous. But exercise does that in a controlled way where we're not actually feeling the detrimental effects, so the psychological effects. And what actually happens is that it stimulates the sympathetic, the flight-fight. And then when we rest, our vagus nerve, or the rest digest, starts to work harder. And doing this intermittently, potentially by high-intensity exercise or ever so often, however much you can, by mimicking that, that helps strengthen that nerve and ultimately makes you feel calmer. In addition to that, also, certain bacteria can actually work to stimulate the vagus nerve as well through hormones like GLP.
So I'm getting questions about hereditary factors for both Parkinson's and Alzheimer's. So somebody here says has two brothers that have Parkinson's. So what's the hereditary, and then we'll talk about Alzheimer's.
So Parkinson's isn't considered a hereditary disease in general, although there are some, I guess you can call them risk factors or pathways that can make you more susceptible. A very small percentage, I think it's about only 5% of people who have Parkinson's actually have anything to do with like a mutation. Generally, it's considered an environmental disease, which means that some sort of impact, whether through certain toxins, certain pesticides. People have really been fighting this pesticide called paraquat. And rotenone is another one, certain chemicals in well water and heavy metals, and also maybe even infections. Anything that, one of the reasons why the gut is thought to play a role is because it's one of the ways in which our bodies are exposed to the environment. So any maybe infections that we get at some point, something just goes awry, and so in general, it's not considered really a hereditary disease.
Great. Before we talk about Alzheimer's, I just want to point out that Minna's boss, Julie Anderton, has received funding to study what we call the exposome in regards to aging. So that means air pollution, wildfire smoke, dietary toxins, to see how they impact both the aging process and neurodegeneration. So who wants to tackle heredity and Alzheimer's?
Yeah, so I'll give a stab at that. So people have probably heard about ApoE. So ApoE is probably the most widely talked about hereditary risk factor for Alzheimer's disease. Basically, it's a gene, and it comes in 3 different flavors. And depending on which flavor you get, it changes and modifies your risk for disease. So if, for example, you have what's called the E4 copy, then that increases your risk. 1 copy, I think, increases by about 4-fold, and then 2 copies increases by 10 or more fold. But we've got to keep in mind that this is a relative risk increase. So if your absolute risk of getting Alzheimer's is 0.1% and it's increased by 4-fold, then it's still only 0.4%. So I don't think that people, if they see that they've got an ApoE4 allele, they should be, terrified that this is a certainty for them. It's still part of a landscape of risk. One thing that was interesting, though, I mean, we didn't say it here, but aging is the absolute #1 risk factor that we know of for these diseases.
Duh, kind of obvious,
right,
huh?
Right. And so I think that's understanding the exposome and all this is, and understanding really the root cause of aging, I think is going to be the game changer. But a recent paper came out which kind of questioned this and took all of the different genetic evidence that we've got from all of these, like hundreds of studies on Alzheimer's, and they asked whether or not they could build a kind of composite, like of all of the different genes that you've got, and see whether or not that could predict your Alzheimer's risk better than looking at, say, one gene like ApoE. And they actually found that they were able to predict Alzheimer's decently well using a polygenic score. So I think the more data that we get around genetics testing, the more we'll be able to predict somebody's risk. So it could be the case that it is quite hereditary, but it's not one gene. It's probably going to be hundreds or maybe even thousands of genes.
That's great. Yeah, go ahead.
You also have the familial forms, which is familial AD. Those are related to genes. Those are really bad. You know, the early is much earlier onset, more aggressive, and the mutations in APP and presenilins. So that's a separate group, and that's definitely related to amyloid accumulation.
Great. So we have these genes that, good, bad, but there's a lot of stuff that hasn't been discovered yet, right? As far as like what might be protective. That's where I go, people get freaked out. Oh my God, I have this risk factor. Well, you could have protective factors too that we don't know about yet, right?
ApoE2 is actually protective.
Yes. So I want to point out while I talk about, so there's a lab here at the Buck, the Ellerby lab, that also studies Alzheimer's, and they are actually growing tiny brain organoids from skin cells from people who have those different risk factors. And they are looking very closely to see, if they can find treatments, and also to find out what's behind brain resiliency and what can we do to boost brain resiliency. So that's another Alzheimer's related project that's going on. I got a question from somebody. What are the best ways to boost mitochondria? I think, Manish, this might be for you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, one of the best way, again, coming down to is like exercise. And it's not enough to say it.
It's always the hardest thing, isn't it?
Yeah, it's the hardest thing. But yes.
Why can't it be just laying down?
Go watch Netflix, right?
Yeah. So yeah, I mean, again, like exercise is one of the best ways by which you can boost mitochondria, and the reason it's because it's like when you are exercising, what you are basically doing at micro level, you are kind of putting a stress on your body and muscles specifically when you're doing hard resistance exercise. And what it does, it just gears up all the mechanisms which are helpful for clearing up the damage. Autophagy, mitophagy are one of these specialized form which clear up this damage. And what they generally do as a feedback is also boost the mitochondria, because when you are clearing up the damaged mitochondria, which are getting damaged because you're doing exercise at a molecular level, it just boosts another cycle that you need more mitochondria. And as a feedback, you have a general signaling mechanism to boost up the mitochondrial biogenesis. So yes, one of the best ways to boost mitochondrial activity.
So can I just jump in there? Because Manish, obviously you found this small molecule, and that was from a natural product, right?
Yeah.
So could you talk about like that whole
Absolutely. So we found this small molecule which we call a mitophagy-inducing compound, and this is from a natural product library screen which we were investigating to see what boosts autophagy process in general. So what it turns out, this molecule, it clears up the damaged mitochondria, and as a result, it also boosts the mitochondria in general. So clearing up damaged mitochondria boosts mitochondria. And overall, the impact is that you improve mitochondrial function. And one of the effects, what we have shown is that improving mitochondrial function, and which is one of the primary hallmarks in healthy aging, is like you have dysfunctional mitochondria, which leads to aging. And if you can boost mitochondrial function, you can even extend lifespan. And what we showed with this molecule is that it extends lifespan by 40 to 50% in this tiny nematode organism. So clearly, it's like one of the fundamental ways of even slowing down the aging and have an impact not just in one neurodegeneration, but a lot of age-related diseases.
So I've got a couple questions. Folks want to know, how important is sleep a factor for neurodegenerative diseases, and what can you guys say about sleep?
Well, supposedly sleeping aids in the clearance of aggregates from the brain, but I was reading recently that there's some controversy on this glymphatic method of eliminating amyloid beta from the brain, but it's one of the things that supposedly helps. Yes, it also, like, we're talking a lot of exercise, but I think we're kind of biased on because exercise, maybe it's easier to study through biology and we can make molecules to mimic it, but like things like sleep, which there's not that much research on, or your attitude, your cognition, you keeping, doing your Sudokus, doing your passwords, learning, going to do a major, things like that. Is even when you have this app and you dominate the app and all of a sudden they've changed everything, you have to relearn everything. It's really annoying, but I think that's actually good. So yeah. So you should say thank all these people, like Facebook, Instagram. Just keep on changing it.
IT technology, it's good for you. Okay. So people want to know, in relationship mostly to Parkinson's, but overall, how much exercise? How do you split out? Somebody says, I observed that Parkinson's patients who can't walk unaided can ride a bicycle. Why is that? So what's going on there, Minna?
I don't know if I can answer that question, but I do remember once hearing, this was actually a TED Talk. This was a young woman who was a graphic designer, and her uncle has Parkinson's. And when she came to his house, she noticed that he can't walk across the floor, but he can very easily walk down or upstairs. And what she did is she actually made this, she graphically designed a covering on the floor to mimic stairs, and he was much more easily able to walk across his house as a result. Yeah, which was very interesting. So I think that it means that there's just different mechanisms that are involved in different movements. Some people also who can't walk forward can more easily walk backwards, who have Parkinson's. But in terms of, I think that there's also a factor of distraction. A few years ago, I attempted a Movement Disorder Society clinicians training, not a clinician at all, I was just interested. And they had a lot of patients there who would have maybe tics or spasms or such, and if they distracted their body, or if their face was experiencing a nervous tic of such, touching one part of their face would sort of distract them from that, and their face would be completely smooth. So also when moving around, I've noticed that some people with Parkinson's, they often distract themselves from the actual movement by touching something, and that helps them walk and overcome obstacles. And that's another factor, that often perceived obstacles such as doorways or narrow hallways maybe, or stepping over something, that can often inhibit someone who has Parkinson's, who was perhaps moving quite well across the floor, suddenly seeing that obstacle, not maybe really knowing or understanding how to get around that. So in terms of just different, I think the other part of the question were different forms of exercise, and I did highlight, and we've talked about aerobic exercise, but we also talked about our brain learning, and you can imagine if you're sedentary and if you're not working your body in some way, or you are in one way but not another way, whenever you're learning something new, you're improving the functionality of your brain, and you're improving the synaptic plasticity, or changing your brain actually when you're doing it. So someone who's maybe very sedentary, doing things like getting up and standing, getting up from a chair, sitting back down, or lifting small weights, or just getting their body moving, it's very possible that the more they do this, the more they will be able to do more in the future. So small steps, even things like stretching, can also have benefit as well.
So I just wanted to comment really quick. I remember years back, I was volunteering, like we did these holidays with elderly, and one of the persons had Parkinson. She could barely move at the start of the holidays. And by the end of the holidays, she was getting up and down, no problem. So it was, a lot of it really is the bad is in the brain, but also the good is, it was.
Do you mean social interaction?
Yeah, so that social interaction, there were people that were abandoned, like didn't have much social interaction in society, and the care and all that, it was just crazy.
Social interaction is very important. I know specifically about Parkinson's, but it's also true about Alzheimer's. It could have something to do with the dopamine. It could also, when you're socially interacting, often you're making eye contact with other people, and that can calm your nervous system. Often I think of Parkinson's as you're kind of in this heightened sympathetic state, and anything to calm us down and get our nervous system rebalanced is good. That's why I say exercise, but social interaction might be another factor.
Actually, and just to add on, probably you must have seen this documentary in Netflix talking about blue zones, like people who are long-lived and centenarians, particularly popular. One of the common theme, and these are all over in the world, these places, and even one right here in the California also. It turns out the common theme into them is like the community, the sense of the purpose is like the community and social interactions between them. And having a purpose to life is like many of these people are doing some voluntary activity and everything, and it turns out like it's just the way they live the life and having a purpose, it tends to slow down your aging and have a beneficial effect in general. And so it's definitely a common theme over there.
Great. I want to move on. I got a couple questions about supplements and how we should approach that. I know there was a study out recently that said a multivitamin, it doesn't really help us live longer, but then there was an earlier study that said multivitamins are good for your brain. Where do you guys stand on supplements? And, other people wanted to know about there's like different forms of herbs that are based on mushrooms, that are supposed to be good for your brain. I've heard choline is good for your brain. Where do you guys stand as far as going to the health food store and getting something out of a bottle?
I'm going to be so boring here. So. I think honestly, you should really be getting all these things from your diet. I mean, that's obvious. That's the obvious best way to get supplements. To get vitamins and minerals. That said, I have read that the majority of Americans don't get sufficient magnesium. Now, magnesium is super essential. It's required for DNA replication, DNA repair. It's fundamentally important, and most people don't get it. And I was like, I don't believe it. If you have a healthy diet, right, you've got to be able to get it. So I tested this myself. So I actually tracked everything that I ate for a month. And I was just never getting enough magnesium. And I eat a really healthy diet. I'm ridiculous, ridiculous amounts of green vegetables and all that. I guess this is just something to do with the quality of modern food or something like that. But it might be advisable to consider taking a magnesium supplement, for example. That would be the only thing that I found from my experiment was the thing that was deficient.
Yeah, I agree. It's it's having a holistic diet and everything. It's definitely good. It's no alternative for having a supplements and everything. But yeah, true. It's there is something in the diet, particularly the way we are eating, what kind of food you are eating, and even it's available in the grocery stores. You are not getting all of this essential things which are required for our brain health. And as we are understanding more about the process, how these supplements are beneficial, it's actually there are more tests, experiment exactly you did is tracking the thing and everything. You get to know that, yes, how important they are once you conduct the experiment, and similar kind of individual tracking experiments.
I mean, from a scientist perspective, not just telling you my one person experiment, but the people have looked at the different things, right? So there have been tons of studies where people have tried to see, does omega-3 fish oil supplements work, for example? And you'll find some studies where it works, some studies where it doesn't work. This has also been true for multivitamins, like you mentioned. The largest multivitamin study that I've seen was the MIND trial, which was thousands of individuals, and they were giving, these are older individuals, and they were giving them this multivitamin, which is multivitamin and mineral. I think it's Centrum Silver, is not affiliated with them in any way. And I don't think the study designers were either, but they took this, they gave it to thousands of individuals, and it did significantly slow cognitive decline, normal cognitive decline that we see during aging, so memory decline and things like that. And that was replicated in another large study too. So I think there might be something there to that particular multivitamin.
Got it. Anything, you're...
No. I'm a terrible cook, and I don't spend any time, and I just get this Huel thing that's a powder, and that's it.
So I want to talk, we got a couple questions about tests that either predict our risk or, where we're at as far as Alzheimer's and Parkinson's go. So what's the current status? Is there a way for somebody to go to their doctor and go, can you tell me where I am as far as what's going on inside this brain and inside this body? And concurrently, what do you think of people getting genetic testing to see their risk for Alzheimer's disease? Who wants to start with that one?
So I can start for Parkinson's. So there are, sorry, I keep doing there are a few biomarkers that are in the works right now. And last year, the Michael J. Fox Foundation came out with very exciting news that there was something called a seed amplification assay, which can sample the cerebrospinal fluid, which means doing a spinal tap. And it was able to very accurately predict or understand whether someone has Parkinson's. By that groaning, that means that it's a difficult procedure, and so there is now also a blood test and a skin test also that are in the works. So the blood test actually has looked at 8 different proteins that are differentially expressed in people who have Parkinson's and the test was predictive up to 7 years of whether someone would have Parkinson's or not. That they also had a very interesting note that the type of machinery they used to provide the analysis was something that is very common in hospitals, so it makes it very accessible, and they were very cognizant of trying to make this something that would be easily approved by the FDA, just very, very accessible. So very, very exciting stuff. So those are proteins that have to do with inflammation or protein degradation, like Manish's work is on. There are other tests. One is a skin test looking at a type of alpha-synuclein that is thought to clump a little bit more. The spinal tap also is related to alpha-synuclein protein as well, but recently there's also some work in trying to identify that protein in the blood as well. At this point, I think that this is something that has really just come out in the past year or so, but I think that very soon, I can't give a timeline, but I think it's very possible that people may be screened soon for Parkinson's, and at least it will help, maybe it can help determine the progression of the disease. It can also maybe help to establish whether things like exercise or things that we're trying to do to make ourselves healthier can be reversing or helping us with Parkinson's, but it can also help those who are perhaps in the very, very early stages to get treatment earlier on before they have the disease impacting them significantly.
So what's happening with Alzheimer's and biomarkers?
So you have the groups of biomarkers, blood tests, CSF, and then you have your PET scans that are trying to detect amyloid beta levels and tau pathology. There's a lot of money to be made in blood tests, and so those are being developed. Ideally, those you will go to your primary care physician. They could do a blood test, and mild digital tests, cognitive tests. So there's a lot of work on that. There's also a lot of money to be made on that, so I think those won't take very long. For now, the reliable ones are CSF and the PET scans they're using in clinical trials. But yes, I think it will be a thing.
I think I'd just like to add is we probably have a lot of therapies which may be very effective for Alzheimer's or many of the brain diseases. But I guess one of the major problems is the time point when you want to give them. And the problem comes down to, again, diagnostic. It's like, if only we can identify these diseases very early, these all therapies which we have currently, might be very well and good. So it's definitely a fundamental issue right here, or at least it's like diagnosing these diseases very early when they are appearing and you don't even have the symptoms, when you're not going to anywhere at that point if you can diagnose. So, something like that would be a very game changer for all of the current existing therapies, and it's definitely of interest.
Yeah, it also will save a lot of money actually too in interventions, more accurate testing, accurate diagnostics. But also I think our project specifically is targeting the more advanced stages, because we want to target multiple aspects of Alzheimer's. So these current drugs like MB, and we'll see about donanemab, they're for certain populations, ApoE4 positive, that are more susceptible to ARIA, and more advanced stages. They're not, well, and I'm not an MD, but for what I've been reading, they're not we're not there yet. So we still definitely need a cure or need new strategies for advanced cases, and I think we cannot forget that. We have to put a lot of effort on that.
In the cases where you know that you are going to develop a disease, yes, all these therapies are very good, even if,
I would just say that, because if you're treating somebody who already has advanced stage disease, then they've already suffered a lot of cell death in the brain, and those cells aren't coming back, right, Chaska?
Yes, well, you mentioned neurogenesis before, for example. That's really, that's not going to do anything, because it's just very localized in the brain. So you don't get new neurons. You get very fewer functionally. When the neuron's gone, it's gone. But in stages where you also have to know, people that have stroke will take a few months and learn to talk again. So you can actually rewire the neurons you have left. So I think there's still hope. That people might be significantly impacted, especially at more advanced stages. But we have to see whether there could be a functional recovery.
So this hour has flown by. A final thing, I'm going to ask each of our panelists, and they were not prepared for this. So I got this from AARP, I didn't make it up, but their prediction is that in the next 5 years, there's going to be more breakthroughs, especially as it relates to Alzheimer's. There will be convenient blood tests. There will be a variety of drugs, and there will be customized research-proven lifestyle strategies. AARP guesses that within the next 10 years, that Alzheimer's disease may be treated in your doctor's office the same way that we treat heart disease and diabetes now, with medications and lifestyle changes. So what do you guys think? You think those are accurate? What do you think?
I agree. Blood tests we've already talked about. A variety of drugs that can attack the diseases on many fronts. I think that's a critical concept that's completely lacking from our modern medicine. It's like we insist on treating diseases by targeting just one of its aspects. And when we know there's several, we have to be able to treat them many aspects at the same time. Once we do that, I suspect we're going to start curing a lot of things we thought were incurable.
Right?
Yeah, exactly. Yes, and I guess the recent FDA approval had definitely made a lot of attentions in this field, and there is going to be an incremental invention. So even if we are what exactly Chaska is saying, we are doing all of these therapies in silos, we will be at a point where we can combine all of these modalities and have much more synergistic effect. So definitely, yes, there are very good chances.
Great.
Just to add the last point, and I know this about Parkinson's, not Alzheimer's, but the customization, that's something that is very critical because it's such an individualistic disease, as probably are most others. But if you think about the differences in the gut microbiome, the environment, all of these different things, it's very individualistic. And as some of you may know, it changes from day to day and even several times within one day. So there are actually apps, like there's one called Strive PD from a company called Rune Labs based in San Francisco that has an Apple device, Apple Watch, iPhone program that can track your symptoms and can also see whether if you're exercising and if you're making any modifications to your lifestyle, whether that's improving your symptoms. And so that it's always gathering data, and it can also be something that your doctor can look at and see whether something is working and whether it can really customize treatment and make it very specific to that person, which I think is very vital.
Great. Want to thank, weren't these guys great, huh? So I'm going to make a pitch next month. I will be back here on August 7th. I'm going to be talking to John Newman. I think this will be a do not miss event. John Newman is both a researcher on aging. He's also he's a geriatrician. He takes care of older adults. We have a critical shortage of geriatricians in this country. Most doctors don't know that much about the aging process. And John is going to be here to help us learn how to be our own advocates, to be our own geriatrician, so that when we go into the exam room, we are ready and we're prepared to really get the care that we need. So I'll be here. I'm looking forward to this one. I hope you can join me. Our podcast is up and running. The latest podcast episode just posted this morning. It's with Luigi Ferrucci. He talks about resilience medicine. Luigi's great. He's with the National Institute on Aging. So if you like podcasts, we're not getting any younger yet, is the title of the podcast. Also, we're really excited. We have clinical trials happening here at the Buck. So this slide has a QR code out in the atrium. You'll see our clinical research center. There's a sign on the window that has that same QR code. You can find out about clinical trials. There's also information on our website about that. Finally, just thank you so much. I really want to encourage you to come on a tour if you're new to the Buck. Also, I really want to encourage you to consider becoming a donor. These guys need your money. These are the people who are going to do it for us. So if you want to support them, do it, because this is our future. So once again, thank you so much for coming.